can you give us a little more about common violations you're seeing? Like top three violations somebody could look at their credit report and see violations, or what would you tell somebody who is new to this? What would they be able to look at their credit file? What's something that they should look at? What's something that they should go for? Or should you wait for those phone calls to come in and record? Or can someone just look at their credit file and see that, hey, I might have a case here, and move forward like that?
Yeah, so let's talk about basically the letters, right? So say for an example, we talked about the phone call. So let's talk about the letter. So the letter, essentially you get the phone call. Now here comes the letter. It's very important to look at the FDCPA, and then you have it's certain requirements. The FDCPA lays out the requirements that has to be in a letter. So a lot of the times that's what I'm looking for in the letter. And well, you have to understand that the FDCPA is for the least sophisticated consumer. So it's for the common person. And so you don't have to get all fancy and stuff like that to respond to the letter. But I highly suggest that people that's getting them types of letters to reach out, right? So, and I'll give a little guidance on how to respond to them type of letters. And because it can be, um, the consumer can get compensation if done right. So there was a guy that I was speaking to, I think it was on Instagram. He reaches out on Instagram, and he's asking questions, and I gave him a response based on his question. And so I was like, hey man, I can help you out and do this. And he was just like, oh, I'm gonna do it by myself. I was like, okay, cool. So when he got a response in the mail, and then I said, hey, look, let's jump on the phone, let's talk, right? And I said, man, I was offering to help you, but now let's really think on what you did. And so ultimately, he did it wrong, right? So he was disputing, right? He was disputing, asking for verification, and then he told the debt collector to cease. And I said, dude, what is somebody to do? Like, you're asking for a document on one hand, and then you're telling them to stop. Like, what is that debt collector to do? And he was just like, yeah, you're right. He was like, man, I wish I would have paid attention to what you were saying. And I was just like, well, okay. And so it's very important, man, to read them letters, because them letters are sent out to hundreds of thousands of people. And so if you can be the head guy or the head person of a class action lawsuit to stop this illegal abusive activity, that'd be cool. And so, but this is the thing, it starts with reaching out. And so the debt collectors do that because they don't want consumers to like know what their rights are. And that's a problem. And the FDCPA says it lays out the foundation on how they, supposed to contact the consumers and things of that nature.
So it's as simple as, because I know somebody like myself, I'll overcomplicate this. Sounds like the guy on your IG did too. But it's as simple as getting that phone call. And as you said before, don't lie. If you're at work, tell them you're at work. If your baby is sleeping, like you said, tell them your baby is sleeping. I can't talk about this right now, right?
Yeah.
Should you tell them to, what if they say, well, what's a good time for you? Or I'll email you. Or should you tell them to do that? Or should you just leave it at that because you already told them you're busy? And then when they call back, that's the violation. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah. So, so look, I'll just be completely honest with you, right? So I'm just trying to get a violation. I'm just trying to get a
Okay.
violation, right? So I'm just putting enough rope out there, and they're gonna hang themselves. So a lot of defense attorneys say, "Oh, he's what you talking about, got you," or this is he's baiting, and I'm like, dude, no, I have no control of you calling me. Like you called me. So it's just like, it's like, uh, So we go back and forth, but ultimately they end up paying and stuff like that. So the thing that's like a 1-2 punch, what you just said, right? So
Right.
say for example, I'm at work. And what consumers don't understand is that's a that's like is I want to give the analogy is not telling someone to stop, but that's like telling someone to stop, right? So I'm at
Okay.
work, right? And then I can't talk right now. Again, that's like telling someone to stop, but it's not telling them to stop, right? So, say for an example, that's two violations in one. If the consumer can get that on like one recording, that's two violations in one. Because how the FDCPA is written out. So, if you tell someone I can't talk, so you gotta, it goes back to the basics of the FDCPA, just
Okay.
understanding what that statute is meant for, the foundation of it, right? So, say for example, it's for the least sophisticated consumer. It doesn't have to be complicated, right? So, I just heard you say, "Well, I could overcomplicate things." Like, don't do that, right? So, say for example, I like getting a lot of my ideas from like a nail tech, right? Because a nail tech don't have anything to do with like credit repair or suing anybody. They're gonna, if somebody that's not like in the niche or in the community that you're in, they're gonna find the simplest way to do something. And so that's the thing that I like to follow is the simplest thing to do whatever it is. And so like I say, that's two violations in one. People just don't know. And
Right.
so the FDCPA lays out what's inconvenient to a consumer, but you just got to tell them. So if you're dodging that phone call, because I see it, right? So I tell people, hey
Hmm.
man, show me your call log, and I'm just like,
Hmm.
it's like red, missed call, missed call, missed call, and it's
Scam
like,
likely, scam likely, scam likely,
yeah,
scam
it's
likely,
like,
scam likely.
dude, answer that, man.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? So yeah,
Now it
so
even says
one,
telemarketer now.
yeah, yeah. So one is inconvenience, right? And then the
Okay.
two is you inform them that you was at work, and you inform them that it was you couldn't talk at work. And so that's very powerful under the FDCPA.
So the original, so let's go back to the money real quick. Well,
Yeah.
maybe we should talk a little bit more about the money.
Yeah, like
That original
yeah.
filing fee. So it used to be $402. Now it's 405. So
Yeah,
that
it's
original
402.
filing fee, can you get that back if you win your case? Can you get all that back?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. So yes, you get 100% of that back, right? Because
Mhm.
it's like this the civil rights statutes, right? So it's what's called a fee shifting statute. And what
Okay.
that is it's like somebody like me, right? Broke as a joke. Don't got $3,500 just to go knock on an attorney's door and say, hey, this is the type of case I want you to take, right? So it's a fee shifting statute. And what that means is anything that the consumer comes out of pocket, once the case is successfully like litigated and done with, you can get your money back, right? So the FDCPA allows consumers to obtain 100 to up to $1,000, right? So give or take on what the debt collector has done, and so it's just going to depend. So, but without a question, the consumer gets their actual money back. Yeah, if they had
Right.
to pay for consultation, they had to pay for the filing fee, if they had to pay for whatever it is, right? Just show a receipt, and the lawyer, or you present that to a judge if you're representing yourself, and you say, "Hey, I want my money back." And so the FDCPA allows for the consumer to get whole with the money that was spent.
So going more than just breaking even, what are some dollar amounts that consumers can win? What are some cases that you're winning? I mean, you're winning like all your cases. So just so people know, like Vance is not an attorney, but you're winning in court all the time, right?
Yeah.
So,
So I've been a part of, I guess, the landmark case that a lot of people talks about is when I helped a guy here from Oklahoma City. He stays in Dallas now. His name is Alan Jones. It was 1.5 million. So yeah, so we took that to jury, and that's what the jury came back with. And so what happened in that case is the same thing I'm telling you here is to record the calls, right? So he's called me. He's like, "Hey man, I got this going on." And like I tell everybody, "Hey man, start recording the calls. Just record the calls, right?" And so what we got them on tape saying was, essentially calling him a nigger, right? So, "Hey nigger, pay your bills." So that's what it was. So we took that to the jury, and the jury came back with 1.5 million. And so, yeah, so within that case, we had a lot of actual damages, right? So, in the United States, we banned racism. So, and then, so what was shocking about that case was the
that
guy
gets
who was
worse.
doing it. Yeah, the guy who was doing it, the guy who was making the phone calls, he recently. Well, you got to understand the mentality of debt collectors, right? So he had recently got out of prison not too long, right? So think about it. When you get out of prison, like nobody wants to give you a job. And that's just the reality of like the United States, right? And so he stumbles in and be a debt collector. So you got to understand another aspect of being in the debt collection industry, like it's high turnover rate. So
Right.
he moved up the ranks pretty quick, right? So he didn't have nothing to do. And he's like, all right, so these people is coming in and out. He's moving up the ranks. And so what happened was we kind of like psychology, like played with him a little bit, right? So guys, they put a lot of ego on the line. And so, we have this thing going around now in 24. It's called like stand on it, right? So we had him on tape, and he just folded in the deposition, and so he still had that prison mindset, and so we used that against him, and he admitted to everything under the sun, and he stood on that, and we stood on $1.5 million.
Sprinkle, sprinkle. What? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The reason why I like the FDCPA is like it doesn't have procedures for consumers to follow, to dispute, right? So the FCRA has procedures in place for consumers to dispute. So to be on, like, to just tell you, it's like, you know, me and a UFC fighter, right? We're fighting. The FCRA protects these companies just a little bit more. But once they break the law, it's a little bit more exposure. But the FDCPA is just all brawl out, like let's go. You know what I mean? Because it's not it's to protect the consumer in a vicious way, and it's no procedures for consumers to dispute. And that's what I like about it. But like, the FCRA, you have to say, hey, I'm disputing the completeness and or the accuracy of the information. And next thing you know, now either TransUnion, Equifax, or Experian has to say, this is a good dispute or whatever. And then they have to relay it over to the furnisher. And it's just a lot of hoops, right? That the consumer has to go to. But dealing with a debt collector, it just doesn't exist like that.
So this applies to medical bills, right? What percentage would you say credit reports have errors on them?
Well, all of them, like 100%, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so you got to understand what is an error, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we're dipping off into the FCRA, so the Fair Credit Reporting Act. So if the information is unverifiable, if the information is incomplete, if the information is inaccurate, right? So say for an example, the FCRA doesn't define accuracy, right? So, and the FCRA doesn't define completeness, right? So the CPA doesn't, I mean, the FCRA doesn't define verifiable. So now we just have, what does that mean, right? And so now you're talking about words, right? So now here we go again. We're talking about what words mean. It's a jury question. And so we're talking about what you should have done, what you could have done. That's a jury question. So, but getting to that part is a hurdle for most people. But so so yeah, that's the gist of it, right? So, say for example, if somebody was to just start disputing under the FCRA, you have what's called Section EB, right? So, and what I'm saying is, to the people that's viewing this, you have the FCRA, and if you look at the table of contents, you have like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, right? You have it in order, and then they have 602, 603, 604, 605. It just goes in alphabetical order, and then it just goes, and you know you just figure it out. You know what I mean? So because say for an example, I just said section EB. So
Right.
that's the first thing that the consumer um, is invoking is section EB. So that that kicks in before the consumer actually disputes. So say for an example, if a consumer had a valid claim, you can sue the consumer reporting agencies without even disputing. That's a claim within itself, without
Right.
even without even sending a written letter or whatever the case may be. So that's very powerful within the FCRA. So a lot of people don't understand when it comes to the FCRA, when a consumer sends, let's say for example, the letter. When a consumer sends the letter, that letter is considered under the FCRA a reinvestigation. Um, and so, why is it called a reinvestigation? It goes back to EB, right? So, say for an example, they had to do something right the first time. And so, when
Mhm.
you're addressing the situation, it's called a reinvestigation. And so there's procedures within the FCRA that the consumer reporting agency have to adhere to, which is never done. So and so I was a part of my own case in 2019 where I had to sort out all this stuff, what could have done, what they should have done, and stuff like that. So we came up to the agreement of $300,000, and I had to hire an expert witness. That cost me like $10,000. I had to do some depositions that cost me $2,500 a piece. And so people don't know the amount of time that has to go into it. People don't know the amount of money that has to go into it. And so to have that um, to have that type of result. And so what I discovered in my case was, which is in everybody's case, you just have to go and explore it, right? You just have to bring it to light that, and in my case was Experian, right? So Experian didn't do the, um, they didn't do a proper reinvestigation, right? So it's handled overseas in South America, and so it's quite shocking that the people where they handle their disputes, they really don't speak English like that, right? So the dispute was mishandled. And I proved that, in depositions and going through discovery and stuff like that. And then um, what I found out in deposition, the lady who was giving me her testimony on what happened in my case, she wasn't, she didn't even have a passport. So how can you tell me what's going on overseas when you never been there? You know, it's like it's like how you gonna tell me what's in my refrigerator if you never seen what's in my refrigerator? It's just come on.
Facts.
Yeah. So So yeah, so we got her testimony disqualified, and then we was getting real deep into motion practice to subpoenaing people who actually touched my dispute and stuff like that. So they didn't want to deal with nothing like that, and so they we ended up settling for 300,000.
For people that are just finding out about this, what resources would you recommend that people start learning about the FCRA, the FCDPA?
To be honest with you, I, let's say for an example, right? We look at the FCRA. It's about 100 some odd pages. So somebody might look at that
Right.
and get overwhelmed. And really, all you need to just hone in on is Section EB, Section I,
Okay.
and S2B. That's it. And really, if you was just like highlight and copy and paste like on a Word document, all of that stuff I just said, it's probably 4 pages.
Okay.
Probably 4 pages max. So it's a lot of it just don't don't matter to your situation, And
Right.
so like the FDCPA, I think it's about probably 5 statutes that I use out of that routinely.
Okay.
It's not much that people need to do to be successful.